another episode of Hidden Stories Healed Now. And now you know, there's always people that are important in your life, that make a difference in your life, and this one happens to be one of them. This episode, we're going to talk about the impacts of being a mom when a child is incarcerated. And how do you work through it and those challenges? But it is my honor to introduce to you my friend, my sister, and if you like my hairstylist, Dr. Brenda Miller.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being willing to share your story. There's so many people that through the facts of life, challenges happen, and we're having to be faced with what's presented to us. So would you mind sharing with the audience your story?
My story is quite a long story, but to kind of sum it down into my son, which is my only son, was taken away from me through incarceration. And with that incarceration, it really left so many puzzling, unanswered questions. And I raised him right. I thought I did all the right things. Lived in the suburbs, little white picket fence, private schools, all of the above, everything that you could possibly look for as far as an ideal family. But I found out that, I was one of those people that kind of, I don't want to use the word turn my nose up, but I wasn't interested in other people that had those kind of situations. But until it hit my doorstep, and it changed everything. And with that being said, I didn't know how to deal with it. I was very angry. I was bitter. It wasn't supposed to happen to me. My son, I thought was the ideal son, but just unfortunately things that he was getting involved with behind the scene that I wasn't aware of caused him to be incarcerated. And actually, they gave him a lot longer time initially than he got, but he did do 10 years. And with those 10 years, it was very heartbreaking. There was no manual, there was no solution, there was nothing. And it didn't matter who would say, I understand, I'm here for you. None of that really mattered to me because it was just the heartbreak of my son being taken away from me to incarceration.
So as this occurred, and I know that, for just being a mother and a parent, I can only imagine the heartbreak of what that feels like, especially when you watch them take your child away, and you're trying to figure out why. I did all the right things, and these things happen, and where did he go wrong? As you began to deal with those things, were you able to pinpoint something that said this was it? Is it that it's something that you missed, or was it just he made a bad choice?
I questioned myself from every area, and until one day he had a conversation with me and said, Mom, it had nothing to do with how you raised me. I just made some bad choices. And I always thought, after it was all said and done, I tried to go back and I realized that my son always tried to fit in. He didn't have a big brother per se, or he wanted to fit in with other guys and be cool. And his dad and I had gotten him out of little petty things, traffic tickets, things like that. But when it got to this situation, it was something that we couldn't get him out of. And, we were both, his dad and myself were public figures, and a lot comes along with that as far as, people, asking, want to know what, how, and, all the above. And I just, for the first 3 years, I really wouldn't talk to anybody about it. It took me 3 years to really talk about it. But at the end of the day, I realized that we have to be open-minded and realize that it can happen to you just like it can anybody else, because I never imagined that to happen to me, but it did.
You know, it's one of those things that, you know, they always say, until you walk the shoes, you don't understand.
Correct.
And the ability to really empathize. And, you know, first I want to say that, you know, I want to commend you for taking the opportunity to look inward. But I commend your son for telling you, Mom, it had nothing to do with you. It was not your fault. I made the bad choice. And we know kids will be kids. But in this day and age in society, we can make a choice. A child can go wrong one time and have to pay a price of a lifetime, not to mention peer pressure. We're going to take a station break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about peer pressure and setting it.
Okay.
We'll be right back.
Every story has a hidden element that is not often shared. Hidden Stories, Healed Now, with host Vicki Wright Hamilton, seeks to share the hidden gems in real-life experiences. Our guests are ordinary people sharing their stories of overcoming insurmountable odds while providing hope and inspiration.
We often want to understand, what are the tools that we can use to help us as we're dealing with these challenges. We're going through all of this anguish. We're in the middle of an obstacle. What can we do? Some people, they like to write. I encourage you to keep a journal. Let the energies of the things that are on the inside come through your hands onto that piece of paper and allow others to learn. Some people may really want to meditate. It's really about being calm and thinking and letting that energy guide you. And that can help you to overcome all of the anguish that you may be feeling when you're going through such a challenge. And lastly, some people want to get into a position where they can listen. Some people want to listen to advice. They want to go to somebody that they can listen. And so remember that there's nothing wrong with reaching out to get that help. Find a therapist if you need it. It's not a bad word. Welcome back. Brenda, as you were talking, beforehand, and we were saying before the station break, looking at the fact that this did occur, this did happen, and your son made these comments and all of that to you, going through the process of the 10 years. You said the first 3 years you didn't talk to anyone. Did you have opportunities to visit him? Were you able to go and see him at all?
Yes, I did, as often as I could. I couldn't stay away. But when it came time to go and visit him, I tried to see him at least every other week. And when I tried to go visit him, it would be 2 days before and 2 days after of getting nauseated and just really sick. But I knew that I had to see my son. And I knew that I had to be strong for him. But for the fact that when you go, it's like they, I said I wasn't going to tear up by this, but sometimes I live it still. And you, when you go into the prison, the sound of the bars, the pat down and everything that you go through, it seems like you've been incarcerated yourself, because it was just hard to go in and see him there. And there was nothing I could do about it, nothing. I just had to be strong because I had a younger child at home. So I had to be strong for her. And even when it came to leaving, just for the mere fact how they closed the bars behind you and all you could do is see him on the other side of the bars. You couldn't take him with you. You couldn't do anything. And just, you got to get pat down and searched down again. And then you got to travel the long road back home again. And it took a couple of days to actually say, okay, I was afraid for him because, like I said, he was raised in a good family environment, where there was no fighting or anything like that, and my fear of him being incarcerated, he was a small guy, and the fact that if someone did something to him, just so many questions that, I had to live with. What would I do? How would I do? And what I realized through it all, I had to really, really pray. And it helped me to build my faith because I went to God and I said, well, Lord, you gave him to me for 23 years. Now I'm giving him back to you. And at that point is when I realized that this is much bigger than I am. So in order for me to actually be strong through the rest of his incarceration, I had to really, really, really pray a lot, and just be strong for the child that I had at home, the younger child.
So, I know it's when we get in certain situations, prayer is the only thing that gets us through, as we're dealing with that. And you mentioned that you were a public figure and that people wanted to have, question you and wanted facts and all of that. I'm sure that had to have an emotional, physical impact on you, even outside of visiting him, and being able to, put your eyes on him to say, I know he's there because I put my eyes on him, but when people in the community around you. So for our audience, when they run into people that are facing this situation and they have friends that are facing this situation, what can we say or do to help you get through it? Is it words that we can say, or are there behaviors we have to do? What does that look like?
I would say just learn to have empathy for other people. Don't turn your head to what's right in front of you. And especially now with a lot of young boys that are coming along, young guys that look like my son. And we want to turn our head and not, reach out to them. And even I say for men, sometimes pull them by the coattail and just say, talk to them and try to let them know that there's a better way. I mean, being cool is okay, but you can be cool and stay out of prison as well. And that's the one thing that I would say. It takes a village to raise a child. And seeing someone else's child going down the wrong road, if you just kind of, let them know that, hey, I see you, if nothing else, and that would kind of sometimes help them to be ashamed of not going into embarrassment to the family or anything like that, because it does destroy the whole family. It destroys the entire family.
Can you talk a little bit about that when you say it destroys the family?
My son has children, and the children were like 2 and 3 years old. And for the time that he spent in prison, they actually saw their dad from a child until they become that adolescent stage. And I tried to step in to be that absent parent with taking them. I didn't like really taking them to the prison, but I wanted them to know their dad and have some type of relationship. So I did that, and it really kind of affects the children as well.
Did you see it as was it positive for the kids or negative? Were they able to adapt?
I did not, for my kids. I mean, they're okay, they're fine now, but I didn't really like taking children into the prison system, because to me, this picture of vending machines with candy and all these things, the treats for kids, and kids get excited about that, but it's really not a good place, So for that being said, I didn't really care for it. I really didn't, but I did it, in order. And even when my son came home, he actually went and got his daughter and raised his daughter himself, because he was absent for so long through those primary years, which and now it's turned out in the end it was good, but during that time it was very difficult.
Okay, so we're going to take a station break, and when we come back, the last thing that I want to talk about is coming back home and the welcome home. We'll be right back.
Every story has a hidden element that is not often shared. Hidden Stories, Healed Now, with host Vicki Wright Hamilton, seeks to share the hidden gems in real-life experiences. Our guests are ordinary people sharing their stories of overcoming insurmountable odds while providing hope and inspiration.
We often want to understand what are the tools that we can use to help us as we're dealing with these challenges. We're going through all of this anguish. We're in the middle of an obstacle. What can we do? Some people, they like to write. I encourage you to keep a journal. Let the energies of the things that are on the inside come through your hands onto that piece of paper and allow others to learn. Some people may really want to meditate. It's really about being calm and thinking and letting that energy guide you. And that can help you to overcome all of the anguish that you may be feeling when you're going through such a challenge. And lastly, some people want to get into a position where they can listen. Some people want to listen to advice. They want to go to somebody that they can listen. And so remember that there's nothing wrong with reaching out to get that help. Find a therapist if you need it. It's not a bad word. Welcome back. Let's continue this episode. As we were talking, Brenda, one of the things that I, want to understand is, you went through all of this, you had all of these family challenges and obstacles in front of you. Now the day comes, he's coming home. What is the welcome home, and what's the afterlife like?
Well, with him coming home, it was like, Lord, I just thank you for a second chance, because I looked at it as though I was able to go and touch my son, physically put my hand on him, but I could have been one of those mothers that was going out to the cemetery to put flowers on a grave, and it didn't happen to me. So when he came home, we had a celebration, family all came together, and I would really say he learned a lesson, because he come right out, he hit the pavement full speed ahead, got a job in the city, and in a matter of a couple of months' time, he was working, doing good, got married, bought a home, and he's just, I just look at him now and just, I said, Lord, just thank you. Thank you for allowing him to have a second chance. Not only me, he has a second chance to be the man that you've ordained him to be.
How are you feeling emotionally?
I live with it a little bit still, because there's some things I need to change, but, I still hold on to that little boy of mine. And he's a grown man, of course, and that's all a part of being a mother to a son. So, but when I see him, it's always a smile. And no matter what he does, I'm smiling because I got my son back, and it didn't have to turn out that way.
Well, praise God for that.
Yes.
Yes. It's, I want to say to you that, sharing these types of experiences and, there's pain, there's anguish, there's anger, there's all of these things that we go through that we deal with. And then you got to see the sun on the other side. We got to the mountaintop and he got to come home. Yes. You got to touch him. And I commend you for taking the perspective to say that, wow, I'm not going to look at the negative. I'm going to look at the positive.
Right.
Because he could have been in a grave and he wasn't. And I'm thankful for that.
Exactly.
You know, it's changing our paradigm and our conversations that allow us to see things differently. And so I commend you.
Thank
You
you.
know, and I know that every day is not easy. The memories will always be there, but you can always look back and say, look for where we have overcome
Exactly.
and where we are.
Exactly.
So congratulations on
Thank you.
that.
Thank you.
So let's see if we have a question from the audience.
Hey, Dr. Miller.
Hi.
I have a question. What if you had to do one piece of advice for a parent that has a child or adolescent going into the prison system or incarceration, what is the one piece of advice that you would give them?
I would say to any parent, pay close attention to your child, because a lot of times they could be seeking for attention in so many ways, and we're busy working. And like I said, I was a public figure, his father was a public figure, so we had regular routines in the home, but pay closer attention to the child, not just the routine things every day. You have to stop and take time to hear that child instead of just giving orders to that child all the time. Hear that child, see how he's feeling or she's feeling about any situation. And I think that will bring you closer as a parent to that child to understand that, well, maybe I could have done this or I could have done that. And because I was closed-minded, closed my eyes to a lot of things, I didn't do that a lot of times. I was too busy a lot of times working, so you have to focus on them more.
You know, it's interesting that you say that because we spend the majority of our time working during the course of a day. And we talk about that balance factor in being a wife and a mother and trying to raise children and, and working during those hours. It's how can I pinpoint, really seeing my child? What am I seeing versus what they want us to see? Right? I'm going to display, oh, mama's home. Let me do this now. Versus mama's not here and this is how I'm feeling and this is what I'm going through. And those signs are not always easy to find. Everything is not always obvious, right?
That's true.
So I think that's why it's so important that you're right, having those conversations, having the communication, creating that environment and all of that. But, as you face the situation, and you actually deal with it. If you left and you said, do this one thing as a parent when you left while your child is incarcerated, what would you tell them is the one thing they should do during that time period?
Have faith. Have faith. Because that faith is actually what gets you through any situation. Have faith. And even now that my son is home, some of the things I said to him, he says them back to me. And I just, okay, he's using my words now. But having faith that, this too shall pass and, learn that there's a price that you have to pay for everything.
So having faith. So you heard it here. Let's talk about that power of faith, whatever you may believe in, whatever your source is, however you get that spiritual strength, being able to rely on that spiritual strength to guide you, to lead you, and to move you forward is so important. I really appreciate you taking the opportunity to share these insights and to give us details about what happens in that you don't have to come from a bad home.
No,
and
not
that
at all.
bad choices can happen at any point in time. And that we have to really understand that peer pressure is real. Trying to fit in is real. And when our children are feeling that, we have to be in a position to give them that confidence, to let them know that you do fit in. It's okay to be cool and smart. It's okay to be cool and make good grades, right? And that we put them in environments where they see other people like themselves. And I think that's, you're right. It's really important for us to create that environment and atmosphere for them.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Miller. Can you all join me in thanking my guests?
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome.
Well, I hope you have learned something from this episode. I know I have. And I think that there's a lot of things that we have to think about. You know, we think about our children, we think about our work, we think about our life balances and the emotional, mental, and physical things that can happen to us as we're having to deal with challenges from our children. I know I tell my boys all the time, you're going to be my babies to the day I die.
Absolutely.
Yes, they are grown, but they will be my babies.
Absolutely.
So I understand what it means to have them in your heart when you live your life because you love your heartbeats. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Hidden Stories Healed Now. And remember, for every hidden story that you tell, you only set yourself free. See you on the next episode. Thank you.